Hey legends, before we get into this week's video, I just wanted to say a massive thank you. Last week was our 3-year anniversary on YouTube. In that time we've had some incredible growth, nearly 17,000 subscribers, over 1.7 million views, all the rest of it, the Discord pumps, you name it. It's just been absolutely incredible, and that's all down to you guys tuning in each and every week, even if the tips have their moments. So once again, big thank you for the support. Here's to plenty more years, hopefully, and again, thank you. Anyway, enough of the ramble. Let's get stuck into my tips and predictions for round 6. But let's first, as always, look back at last week. So last week we tipped 6 out of 8 games. Really happy with that result. Picked 2 good upsets with the Raiders and the Dolphins getting up. Unfortunately, I was never going to take the Cowboys to beat the Panthers, and losing, the Dragons game to Golden Point, it is what it is. That could have really gone either way. 6 out of 8 leaves us at 60% for the season, which is well above a pass mark. Now, there was no video last week, but if you do want to see my tips week in and week out, no matter what, they were posted ahead of the first game on Thursday in our free Discord server. So hit the link in the bio to get involved so you never miss a week, even if I have a birthday hangover week off. Now, if you don't know by now, we do run a subscribers tipping comp. All the details to join are shown on screen now. Entry is completely free. We have 3 great prizes up for grabs, so get involved if you're keen. The sooner the better. Big shout out to Knight Rider for taking out top spot, edging out Mr. Lincoln by 1 point. Stephen Letstrot still around that top 3 mark. Bocco, Jake, JAB, congrats to you guys. Well done to everyone in that top 20, and good luck with your tips again this week. Alright, round 6 gets underway on Thursday night with the Dolphins taking on the Penrith Panthers at Suncorp Stadium. Starting first with the Dolphins, they delivered a commanding performance against the Gold Coast Titans, securing their first victory of the season with a 36-10 point triumph at Seabus Super Stadium. The Dolphins capitalised on their numerical advantage early when Tino Fa'asuamaleaui was sin-binned inside the first 4 minutes, with Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow crossing for the opening try and the red and gold piling on 28 unanswered points, with tries from Daniel Saifiti, Max Plath and Connolly Lemuelu. Despite a brief resurgence from the Titans in the second half, the Finns maintained their composure, with Isaiah Katoa controlling the game perfectly and their outside backs going to work. The Dolphins haven't been too far off the pace all season and were deserved winners, but now face a tough couple of weeks with fixtures against the Panthers and the Melbourne Storm. Now, in terms of teams list for the Dolphins, Tom Gilbert is free to return this week after serving his suspension. And as for the Panthers, they suffered a shocking 4th consecutive loss for the first time since 2019, leaving them in very unfamiliar territory deep down the bottom of the NRL ladder after going down to the North Queensland Cowboys 22 points to 18. Despite the return of star halfback Nathan Cleary and Isaiah Yeo celebrating his 250th NRL appearance, the 4-time defending premiers couldn't capitalise on their strong first half performance, with Cleary orchestrating much of Penrith's attack, including a pinpoint grubber to set up Isaac Tungor's try. The Panthers were unable to trouble the scorers in the second stint, but even despite the uncharacteristic errors and lack of flow, they still had a chance to steal it late, only for young centre Casey McLean to butcher a certain try that would have given Cleary a chance to convert it for the win. The dynasty is obviously well and truly over, but I am still not quite ready to write them off just yet. Now, in terms of teams list for the Panthers, Scott Sorensen is expected to return from concussion this week. Dylan Edwards is also listed to make his first appearance since round 2. Jack Cole unfortunately picked up a head knock and will be unavailable this week. Mitch Kenny also left the field with a shoulder injury, only to return. So who knows with Mitch Kenny, he will go for scans. So just keep an eye on teams list on Tuesday. Alright, looking at the two sides head-to-head, Penrith have obviously never lost to the Dolphins in their limited meetings, and interestingly enough, both games have been decided by 10 points or less. I mean, fairly straightforward one for me. I would be absolutely shocked if the Panthers don't get up this week. There's no way they lose 5 in a row, right? On paper, they are the superior side. So for me, Penrith finally bounced back, but just by 1 to 12 points. Before we get stuck into the next game too, I just wanted to let you know that our Selects VIP members absolutely dined out last week. We went 7 from 8 in our best bets. We tipped a bunch of value and best try scorers as well. Shown on screen are our 7 best bets that got up last week. We did 7 straight. If you want access to all of these best bets, plus the best NRL data tools, analysis, previews, and write-ups on the market, you can do that by signing up to the JDB Selects Patreon today for only $10 a week. Get involved. The link is in the bio. Big thank you to all of our current members. Let's get back to the video. Alright, moving now to the first of two games on Friday, starting first with the St. George Illawarra Dragons taking on the Gold Coast Titans at WIN Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Dragons, they suffered a crushing Golden Point defeat at the hands of former clubman Zach Lomax, who nailed a field goal to hand the Red V a 23-22 point defeat. The Dragons started strong, taking a 14-8 lead into half-time. Clint Gutherson, also playing against his former team, was instrumental for the Dragons, scoring 2 tries and racking up 110 running meters, 5 tackle busts, 3 line breaks, and a try assist, truly showcasing his dominance throughout. Unfortunately for Gutho and the Saints though, Lockie Ilias came up with an absolute stinker in Golden Point to gift the Eels perfect field position and ultimately the 2 points. It's fair to say that either Ilias or Chad Townsend are the buys of the season. It has been a really tough return to first grade for Ilias, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's not named to start again next week given his poor run of form and his lack of leadership. I personally don't really know who they'd put in there instead, but surely it's time to give someone else a crack. Now, in terms of teams list for the Dragons, I don't believe they picked up any new injuries, so I am only expecting performance-based changes. And as for the Titans, they suffered a heavy defeat at the hands of the Dolphins at their home ground Cbus Super Stadium, 36 points to 10. The Titans' discipline issues proved costly, with captain Tino Fa'asuamaleaui sin-binned in the opening set for high contact, setting the tone for a challenging evening for the home side. Despite conceding only 1 try during his absence, the Titans struggled to regain momentum. Outside of a couple of late tries from Philip Sami and AJ Brimson in the 65th and 69th minutes, the Gold Coast were never in the game and needed more off the boot from both Jaden Campbell and AJ Brimson, who were unable to match the kicking game and management of Dolphins young gun Isaiah Katoa. The loss now leaves the Titans with a 2-3 record for the season and raises questions about their ability to handle pressure in critical moments. Des Hasler will no doubt be looking for significant improvement as they prepare for this week's clash against the Dragons. And in terms of teams list for the Titans, both Sam Verrills and Isaac Fa'asuamaleaui are expected to be available for selection this week. Unfortunately for them though, Tino Fa'asuamaleaui has been suspended for 1 game for that careless high tackle on Felice Kaufusi. Looking at the two sides head to head, the Dragons, they have won 4 of the last 5 meetings. The Saints have also never lost to the Titans at WIN Stadium, securing a win in all 6 encounters at the ground. Ooh, this one is a real coin flip game. Both sides are the kings of inconsistency. I have no idea which version of each side is going to turn up, but I am going to back the home side here and take the St. George Illawarra Dragons by 1 to 12 points. I think they can finally get a win at home this season, and without Tino, the Titans' best player for the past 3 weeks, I think they will struggle a wee bit. So for me, with no confidence whatsoever, the Dragons 1 to 12. Alright, and the final game on Friday has the high-flying Brisbane Broncos playing host to the Sydney Roosters at Suncorp Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Broncos, who solidified their premiership credentials with a dominant 46 to 24 point win over the West Tigers at Suncorp Stadium. It was an arm wrestle first 40 minutes, with Brisbane unable to find their way through the Tigers' strong defensive line and only 2 points separating the sides at half-time. The script flipped in the second half after an impressive 40-20 from Ben Hunt in the opening minutes got the Broncos on the front foot and began a relentless second half surge, including tries to Willison, Reynolds, and Billy Walters within 18 minutes. Adam Reynolds' chip and chase was unbelievable, but did come at a cost, with the veteran playmaker forced off with a tight hamstring. Despite scoring nearly 50 points, I do still have plenty of concerns about the Broncos defensively, especially through the middle of the park. On paper, you can easily argue that they have the best side in the competition, but they'll need to put in the hard yards if they are going to go one step further than they did in 2023. Now, in terms of teams list for Brisbane, Adam Reynolds will require scans on his hamstring, so we won't know his availability until later this week. Brendan Piakura suffered a serious head injury late in that game and will be sidelined for a wee while, and Jordan Ricky still has 1 more week to serve on his suspension. And as for the Roosters, they suffered a slim 20 to 14 point defeat to arch rivals the South Sydney Rabbitohs in a gritty clash at Accor Stadium. They were under assault for a majority of the first half, committing 15 errors to South's 7 and conceding 11 penalties, but somehow managed to defend a majority of them, entering the sheds just 2 points behind. While the Roosters dominated second half possession and led 14-8 early in the second stanza, thanks largely in part to captain James Tedesco, critical defensive misreads allowed the Bunnies back into it, and the Roosters halves struggled to execute, showing their inability to capitalise on South's injury crisis, which cost them dearly. Chad Townsend was never going to be the Roosters' long-term halfback, but they'll be pretty disappointed with what he's dished up so far this season, given his experience. Now, in terms of teams list for the Chooks, Mark Nwanganitawase was a late withdrawal and will be monitored this week, while Victor Radley is also listed to return from his cheekbone injury. Alright, looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Roosters have won 4 of the last 5 meetings. Brisbane have also lost 4 straight games against the Roosters at Suncorp Stadium. Ooh, should be quite a good game this. I know the Roosters haven't been at their best this season, but on paper, 2 really strong sides. I do think that the Broncos get it done at home though. I know defensively they haven't looked their best, but they have so much more strike and have shown so much more in attack than the Roosters this year. So for me, I am going to take Brisbane 1-12. Alright, moving now to the first of 3 games on Super Saturday, starting first with a road trip to Perth with the Cronulla Sharks hosting the Manly Sea Eagles. Alright, starting first with the Sharks, who were unable to close out the game against the Canberra Raiders at GIO Stadium, getting pipped at the post in a thriller, 24 points to 20. It was an evenly poised contest throughout the opening half, with both sides completing high and going set for set. Brenton Nickera was the standout for Cronulla, scoring 2 tries in the first 40 minutes, but couldn't add to his tally in the second. The Sharks were gifted a golden opportunity to secure their 3rd win of the season when Hudson Young was sent to the sin bin, but Cronulla once again lacked that killer instinct to put teams away. Both Hines and Trindle were outgunned by Jamal Fogarty, with the Sharks halves unable to get their team down the right end of the park or produce points in their limited chances. The loss now drops the Sharks to a disappointing 2-3 record after what looked to be a really promising start to the season, and now prepare for a challenging fixture away in Perth. And in terms of teams list for Cronulla, both Teague Wilton and Sia Sifatalakai were late withdrawals last week, but should return this week. Kyle Ero, however, is expected to be sidelined until round 9 or 10 with that hamstring complaint. And as for the Sea Eagles, they suffered a monster defeat at the hands of the Melbourne Storm in the Battle of Brookie, going down 24 points to 48. Manly were right in the contest in the opening half, even having the better of the Storm before the break, but completely missed the jump after it and never recovered. Tolutau Kola and Hamoli Olakawatu were shining lights, but weren't given enough chances in good ball areas, as well as being forced to defend set after set. The one consolation for the Sea Eagles and their fans is they did manage to avoid conceding the dreaded 50 points, which would have meant that they can't win the comp, but they do live to see another day. Now, in terms of teams list for Manly, Lachlan Croker and Josh Laa should be fit to return this week. Tom Trbojevic is currently expected to make his return in round 9. Jason Saab also left the field late and could be in doubt to play this week. Alright, looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Sharks, they have won 5 of the last 7 meetings against the Sea Eagles. This will be Manly's first outing at Optus Stadium, while the Sharks have won their lone fixture at the game against the South Sydney Rabbitohs back in 2023. Ooh, another really interesting game for this week. Both sides coming off the back of, disappointing losses, but I am going to lean the way of the Cronulla Sharks here. I think their forward pack will get them across the line. It's going to be a close game. I think it's either side by 1 to 12 points for sure. Like I say, I think the Sharks forward pack can get them on the front foot, give Nico and Trindle a chance to play on the front foot, and ultimately edge out the Sea Eagles, who have to do a lot more travel on a shorter turnaround. So for me, Sharkies 1 to 12. Alright, moving now to the second game on Saturday, staying over there at Optus Stadium with the South Sydney Rabbitohs taking on the North Queensland Cowboys. Alright, starting first with the Rabbitohs, who pulled off a tenacious win in the latest chapter of the Book of Feuds, edging out the Sydney Roosters 20 points to 14. It was all South Sydney in the first half, dominating possession and territory off the back of countless Roosters errors, but they could only find their way across the stripe once. The game flipped in the second stint, with the Bunnies seeing just 35% of possession, and despite losing Jamie Humphries, captain Cody Walker, and winger Michaeli Ravalawa, leaving them with just one fit bench player for the entire second half, the Rabbitohs produced a defensive masterclass and managed to capitalise on their limited attacking opportunities, even if the last pass was a couple metres forward. Latrell Mitchell looked good in his first outing since late last year, and I would love to see him remain in the centres, with Jai Gray continuing to impress at fullback. Now, in terms of teams list for the Bunnies, Cody Walker, Jamie Humphries and Michaeli Ravalawa all picked up hamstring injuries, so I doubt we'll see them included this week, but do keep an eye out for the teams list on Tuesday. Alex Johnston is also listed as unknown on when he'll return from a rib injury. Josh Schuster, Ewan Aiken and Tyrone Munro could also be included in the squad this week, so there could be some massive team news for the Rabbitohs on Tuesday, so make sure you're checking in on that. And as for the Cowboys, they delivered a defensive, am I reading this right? A defensive resilient performance? The Cowboys delivered a defensive, resilient performance to upset the four-time defending Premier Panthers 22 points to 18. North Queensland left edge was strong early on and had their opposite numbers done for pace, with Murray Taulagi scoring the opener. They were forced to dig deep when Reece Robson was sin-binned, but impressively held the Panthers scoreless during that period and even scored a try of their own. The Cowboys dominated the second half with Jackson Purdue and Taulagi crossing within 8 minutes of the restart, and while they did open the door for the Panthers with unforced errors down the stretch, they were able to hang on to secure a much-deserved win. Dearden, Purdue and Tamalolo were standouts for me, but it really was a total team performance. Now, in terms of teams list for the Cowboys, Ruben Cotter was ruled out late due to illness, but should be named to play again this week. Alright, looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Rabbitohs have won 7 of the last 9 games against the Cowboys. This will, however, be the Cowboys' first outing at Optus Stadium, while Souths have lost their lone game at the venue against the Cronulla Sharks in 2023. Ooh, another close game. This week feels like it's close game after close game. And I'm going to do something I don't think I've done all season and take the North Queensland Cowboys by 1 to 12 points. I think given the amount of potential changes for the Bunnies, it may be a hill too high to climb. I know Latrell is back and playing well, but I do think there'll be a fair bit of reshuffles to the Bunnies. I will have to wait and see what happens on Tuesday afternoon with the teams list, so if you do want to keep up to date with all of my changes and tips, make sure you do join our free Discord server. The link is in the video description. It's the only place you will get any notification if I do make changes to these tips. But for now, given what I think is going to happen, I am going to take the Cowboys 1 to 12. Alright, and the final game of Super Saturday has the Parramatta Eels taking on the Canberra Raiders at TIO Stadium in Darwin. Alright, starting first with the Parramatta Eels, who secured their first win of the season in dramatic fashion, edging out the St. George Illawarra Dragons 23 points to 22 in Golden Point at CommBank Stadium, with former Dragon star Zach Lomax delivering the decisive blow. For a side that has been struggling on attack, the Eels managed to overcome a 20 to 8 point deficit in the second half to level the scores late, before Lomax's 25-metre field goal 3 minutes into extra time sealed the victory. The Eels' fight back was fueled by fullback Isaiah Iyongi, who ran for 222 metres with a try assist, 1 try and 2 line breaks. Captain Junior Paulo was immense through the middle once again, running for 190 metres in 72 minutes, with 77 of those coming post-contact and 3 tackle breaks. That win really highlighted the Eels' resilience, who completed at nearly 85% in the second half and forced 7 Dragon errors, as well as repelling a late Tyrell Sloan try by forcing his toe into touch, clearly showing a desire to win that had been lacking in the opening month of football. Now, in terms of teams list for the Eels, Matt Dury is the only player eyeing a return this week. Mitchell Moses isn't expected back until round 9, while Bryce Cartwright is listed to return the following week. And as for the Raiders, they produced a spectacular buzzer beater to avoid losing their 3rd straight game, beating the Cronulla Sharks 24 points to 20 in a nail-biting round 5 clash at GIO Stadium. Matty Nicholson scored the opening try for Canberra in the 5th minute, but the Sharks quickly responded. Raiders forward Hudson Young was instrumental, scoring 2 tries in the first half, including one set up by a deft grubber from Tom Starling, who was also outstanding. When Hudson Young was sin-binned, it looked like the Sharks were going to run away with it, but the Milk managed to hold them tryless, with the kicking game of Jamal Fogarty keeping the Sharks pinned down deep in their own end. Hudson was brilliant throughout, but his run in the game's dying moments that led to the game-winning try was just incredible, as was the kick from Savage and the pure effort play from Seb Chris to come all the way across the field, never giving up on the play and being in a position to win the game for his side. We can only imagine what Ricky Stewart may have had planned for that post-game press conference had they not won, and in the famous words of Kanye West, I guess we'll never know. Now, in terms of teams list for the Raiders, no new injuries this week, so I would expect a pretty similar teams list again on Tuesday. Alright, looking at the two sides head-to-head, Canberra have won 3 of the last 5 meetings. The Eels have beaten the Raiders in both of their meetings at TIO Stadium. However, Parramatta have lost their last 3 games at TIO Stadium. This one feels pretty straightforward, but could be a bit of a booby trap, but I do think the Raiders can get it done here by 1 to 12 points. The kicking game of Jamal Fogarty should be the big difference, and the forward pack of the Raiders can compete with Paulo and the like, and I know they got their win last week, and they might have some, renewed confidence, but for me, the Raiders have been the far more superior side this year, and even with the travel, should get the Chockies, but just by 1 to 12 points. Alright, moving now to the first of 2 games on Sunday, starting first with the Melbourne Storm taking on the Warriors at Amy Park in Melbourne. Alright, starting first with the Storm, who were always going to come out of the blocks firing after suffering their first loss of the season the week prior, but I don't know if anyone expected a 48 to 24 point demolition of the Sea Eagles at Four Pines Park. Melbourne started really fast before the Sea Eagles gained some ascendancy before half time, but it was all the Storm in the second half, running in 8 tries to 4. The Big Four combined seamlessly, with Jerome Hughes' running game causing havoc and the effort and energy of Munster, Grant and Pappenhausen always popping up exactly when required. A lot of credit has to go to the Storm's middles too, who completely tore through a depleted Sea Eagles side, in particular Stefano Uta-Ikamanu, who scored the opener and clocked up nearly 150 run meters. It's certainly fair to say that any notion that the Storm aren't competition favourites after last week has well and truly been dispelled. Now, in terms of teams list for the Storm, Ryan Pappenhausen and Xavier Coates both left the field with around 15 minutes to go due to hamstring tightness. Although the Storm did say it was precautionary, they could be in doubt this week. Big Nelson, Asafa Solomona and Will Warbrick are both eyeing a return this week from concussion. And as for the Warriors, they will be well rested following their first bye of the season last week, but the week prior secured their third straight win, taking down the West Tigers in a nail-biter 26 points to 24. Despite the trying conditions, it was a high-quality game from both sides, who traded tries and conversions, with Luke Metcalf converting all 4 of his team's tries and nailing a long-range penalty goal in the 74th minute to seal the comeback victory. Wade Egan, Aaron Clark and Chance Nickel-Klukstad were strong through the middle of the park, and Leka Halasima scored one of the better first career tries with a blistering run down the right touchline, leaving multiple Tigers players in his wake. I've certainly been critical of the Warriors halves this season, and they've now produced 3, really consistent and measured performances, but I do wonder how they'll perform against a strong attacking side when they're chasing points, and I guess we might find out this week. Now, in terms of teams list for the Wars, Rocco Berry was withdrawn late with a hamstring complaint, but should be included again this week. And in terms of head-to-head, well, it's no secret the Storm have a dominant record against the Warriors. They've won 16 straight games against the Kiwi-based outfit. Alright, I'm sure this is pretty straightforward for most people, and I completely get that. The Storm should win. But as a Warriors fan, if we are to break a 16-game losing streak, you know damn well I want to be on the right side of history and have tipped them to win, and I can sit there and say, look, I told you so. So, one-eyed as they come, shoot me down in the comments, Warriors 1-12. Alright, and the final game of round 6 has the Newcastle Knights hosting the West Tigers at McDonald Jones Stadium. Starting first with the Knights, who couldn't get the 2 points despite a 15-day turnaround, being held scoreless to a donut against the Bulldogs, 20 points to 0. Newcastle were forced to defend for a majority of the first half, with the Bulldogs camped down their end for what felt like an eternity. They came up with plenty of handling errors but showed a ton of resistance to not concede a 4-pointer. The second half, however, was a different story, with the Dogs charging home, with fatigue setting in from all the defending finally taking its toll. It's somewhat understandable given the fact that Newcastle lost 2 players in the opening 10 minutes, forcing them to play the remaining game with just 15 men, and they also spent 10 minutes with a man in the bin. So you've got to give them plenty of credit defensively to only concede 20 points, but they really lacked any threat on attack and never really looked like scoring. Now, in terms of teams list for the Newcastle Knights, as I mentioned, James Schiller suffered a Category 1 HIA, so will be unavailable this week. Jacob Saifidi pulled his calf running onto the field, which is pretty remarkable, and looks unlikely to play this week as well. And as for the Tigers, they couldn't keep pace with the Broncos in the second half at Suncorp, going down 46 points to 20. The Tigers started brightly with 18-year-old winger Luke Laulili and Sania Taruva scoring early tries, and Jareem Buller providing 2 try assists to give the visitors a 12-6 lead. The inexperienced halves combination of Galvin and Fainu couldn't match the kicking game of both Hunt and Reynolds, with poor goal kicking also alleviating any potential scoreboard pressure. The performance highlighted the significant direction and leadership Jerome Luai has brought to that side since the start of the year, and when Lotu Fainu failed his HIA in the 48th minute, it was always going to be a tough ask for the Tigers. It's pretty clear to me that the scoreline doesn't reflect the Tigers' performance or effort, so I am expecting a big bounce back this week. Now, in terms of teams list for the Tigers, Lotu Fainu's head knock was ruled a Category 1, so he won't be available to play this week, but thankfully Jerome Luai has served his suspension, so will fill his space back in the halves. Jarrell Skelton is also expected to overcome a hamstring complaint that has kept him sidelined since round 3. Alright, looking at the two sides head-to-head, Newcastle, they have won 4 of the last 5 games at McDonald Jones Stadium. Oh, a bit of a poo slinger to finish it on Sunday again, much like the Dogs and Knights was last week. But I'm going to take the Tigers here by 1 to 12 points. I think the Knights will be absolutely shattered after the amount of tackles they had to make last week. The Tigers, again, despite the big scoreline and nearly 50 points put on them, they looked better. You know, there was fight there. There was effort. They just lacked that direction. I think Luai will bring that back this week. I think either side by 1 to 12 points is an absolute lock. I think it'll be close, and I think the Tigers can get it done to round out round 6. Bang, just like that, we're done for the 6th week of the year. Thank you, as always, for watching. Big thank you again for 3 years on YouTube. Couldn't do it without you guys. Leave your tips and comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one.